How's it going, y'all? Riley here, and today I'm going to be ranking the 12 newest Shonen Jump titles. So stay tuned. Alright, so as I said, today's video I'm going to be ranking the 12 newest titles in the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine. Now, basically there are 20 ongoing titles in the magazine right now, and a couple months ago I realized that I was reading or had read parts of the 8 older titles, all the ones that for the most part have anime adaptations and are currently being published physically in English, but I hadn't read any of the newer 12 titles. And most of them I hadn't heard anything about, aside from maybe 2 or 3 of those 12 titles. So I was really curious to see which of these books were going to be worthwhile to read, and kind of just giving my opinions to other people, because I know that a lot of people are looking at the Shonen Jump magazine and have been saying, you know, a lot of the more popular titles have been ending. What's left in the magazine? You know, what's going to be the next big popular thing? Now, most people watching this video know what I'm talking about. Most people who watch this video know what Weekly Shonen Jump is, but for the small percentage of people who don't, for whatever reason, know what that magazine is, Weekly Shonen Jump is one of the most popular, one of the most well-known manga magazines in the world. And lots of incredibly popular and very well-received titles wind up coming from its pages, including series such as Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, Yu Yu Hakusho, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Bleach, One Piece, Naruto, Slam Dunk, Knights of the Zodiac, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Fist of the North Star. There's just tons of different titles, tons of super popular titles that have come from the pages of Weekly Shonen Jump. Now, like I mentioned, in recent years, a lot of longer-running titles, a lot of more popular titles, has started to come to their ends. And another trend that I've noticed is that there haven't been as many of these really long-running titles, and a lot of them are coming to their ends around like 200 to 300 chapters. You know, we saw, for instance, Demon Slayer ended with just a little over 200 chapters, Promised Neverland somewhere around the same length, and then even the more recent series, Chainsaw Man, just recently was mentioned that it's going into its final stage, so I don't know how many more chapters that's going to be, but that one's close to around 100 right now, so it sounds like it might not last for maybe more than a few more months or something. I don't know. But anyway, it's just kind of a fun idea to think, what's the next big popular thing going to be? What series is going to get attention next? Now, before I start breaking down my thoughts on the 12 younger titles, I just want to mention the 8 older titles that are in the magazine in descending order of length. We have the longest one, of course, is One Piece, approaching its 1000th chapter. Second to One Piece is Hunter x Hunter, which is still less than, I think, 400 chapters at this moment, even though it's been around for just a little bit less time than One Piece has. But as we all know, it's gone through a ton of hiatus throughout the years, so that's why it has less than half the chapters that One Piece does. And then coming in at third is the insanely popular My Hero Academia, which still has less than 300 chapters. And then underneath that, we have Black Clover, We Never Learn, Dr. Stone, Jujutsu Kaisen, which is the most recent one to get an anime adaptation, and then Chainsaw Man, that I mentioned not too long ago, which is the most recent one to get a physical release in English, with Volume 1 hitting in October of 2020. So, of the 12 newer titles, 2 of them now have been announced that they were going to get physical releases in English, and I'll mention that when we get to them. But I want to talk about each of these titles, give my thoughts, give a little bit of a synopsis so you can know what it's about. Basically, say whether or not I think this series is going to last in the magazine, whether it might get canceled, in my opinion, because that does happen quite a bit, as we know. And then also I wanted to mention whether or not I would buy these books if they did wind up getting released physically in English. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking my number 12 series. And I want to mention real quick, if it's at the bottom of my list, that doesn't mean that I don't like it. If it's further down to the bottom, that doesn't mean I'm not a fan of it. It just means that I liked other things more than that series. However, number 12 is the only title that I did not like, that I have not been enjoying, and that is Our Blood Oath. Now, if there are fans of that series out there, you're probably, gasping and getting upset with me for not liking this series, but I just don't really see much redeeming qualities in Our Blood Oath. The series follows a couple of brothers. They're not really brothers, but they are vampires, and they have taken a blood oath to protect humans, essentially. So throughout the chapters that we've had so far, we see these vampire brothers fighting against other monsters and stuff like that to protect the humans from getting harmed, which is a decent concept, I guess. It's very flimsy. There's not much going for it, but it's a decent idea at the very least. But the problem is that in the 2 months or so that this series has been out, they haven't really introduced us to any sort of major antagonist. Until maybe one of the most recent chapters, they introduced a couple characters that basically are just the antithesis of the main characters, that they want to kill humans instead of protect them. So mild spoilers there. But honestly, by this point in the series, by the time that it gets to the end of its first volume worth of material, it should have done enough world building and enough introduction of the characters and stuff that I should be confident that I'm going to enjoy this series, and I should feel confident in this title's identity. But unfortunately for Our Blood Oath, about 2 months in, it really hasn't given me any sort of confidence, and I feel like this one, if it doesn't do anything to hurry up and find its identity soon, it can definitely be on the chopping block and not make it. And if this series does not do anything to improve in the next few chapters, without a shadow of doubt, I would not buy this if it does get released in English. Now, number 11 is High School Family. This is the first of many gag manga, comedy manga, that I'm going to be talking about today. There are a lot of comedy manga in the magazine right now. A lot of these younger ones are comedy series, and this one focuses on a kid who is starting high school, and he's excited to start high school, the next stage of his life, and then he finds out that his dad is actually going to be joining him in high school because his dad never had a formal education. And then right after his dad tells him about that, he finds out that his mom is also going to be joining them because of the same reason. And then they start talking about the fact that his sister is some sort of a prodigy who honestly could be going straight into college, but she decided that she wants to have the high school experience, and so she's joining them as well. And then for a little bit of an added comedic flair, their cat is also going to be going to school with them. So the series is kind of revolving around the comedic aspects of having an entire family going to school together, and all these different people who you wouldn't expect in that setting, kind of dealing with high school problems and stuff. And it's pretty funny. Like there are points where it's made me chuckle. I've enjoyed it pretty well, but it hasn't done anything to really blow me out of the water. One of the things that this series has working against it is the fact that it's only about 10 or 11 pages per chapter, as opposed to the normal, 20 pages or so per chapter. So it has a lot less time to kind of develop its characters and its comedy. And I know you might be thinking, it's a comedy series, does it really need to develop its characters so much? And the answer is yes. The biggest thing that helps a comedy series succeed is in developing the characters enough that you understand their personalities and their motivations, and the comedic situations are made all that much funnier if you have that expectation for what they would do in these situations. And in this series, it's just started to kind of get around to the point where I feel like I'm getting to know these characters and who they are and how they are and stuff like that. But thus far, it hasn't done anything that really makes it stick out much, and I do feel like this one is also a contender for possibly being on the chopping block. But it would be fun if this one could last. This could be a fun, long-running gag series in the magazine. If this one came out physically right now, I also am not likely to pick it up, but I know that this series is going to have its audience, so I hope that those people who do enjoy it eventually do get to pick it up physically in English. And that brings me around to my number 10, and this one's interesting because it's the only one of these 12 series that is not available on the Shonen Jump app, even though it is in the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine. And that's Ayakashi Triangle. Ayakashi Triangle is, however, available to read on the Viz website, and on the Viz website, the user interface is pretty much the exact same as the app. You get to read the chapters, the first 3 and the most recent 3 for free, and then everything else you have to pay for your subscription to read. This is also one of the only 2 titles that has some sort of pedigree behind its creator. This series is by the same guy who did Black Cat, which was a shonen series that I really enjoyed. I read back when I was in high school, and I didn't realize this until now, but he was also the artist on To Love Ru and To Love Ru Darkness. I've never read either of those, and I honestly didn't really know much about them, but if you're not familiar, like I was not familiar, basically they are very, very, very fan service heavy titles that lean a lot into the, ecchi kind of stuff. That said, when I learned that, I was hoping that the creator was going to lean more towards what he did in Black Cat than leaning more towards the To Love Ru stuff, especially since he didn't write To Love Ru. And I was kind of disappointed because at the beginning of this series, it does lean a lot into the fan servicey stuff. Now, the series follows a exorcist ninja who fights these different monsters called Ayakashi, and there is a really strong Ayakashi that he comes into contact with in the first chapter. And in his fight with this Ayakashi, he is transformed from a guy into a girl. So the main kind of gimmick here is that it's a guy in a girl's body, a la like Ranma 1/2 or something, except for the fact that he can't transform back into his male form. So a lot of the comedy in this series is derived from that fact that he is a guy in a woman's body, and him doing different things that would be, normal for a guy to do, like sitting in different poses or wearing different things or acting a certain way, but he's in a woman's body, so it makes it a little bit different, and it winds up getting a lot of the fan servicey type sequences in those moments. I had really, I don't want to say high hopes. I had hopes from the beginning that it would start moving away from leaning into the fan service stuff. And fortunately, a few months into the series, it does seem like he's leaning away from that stuff. And it seems like they're going to be introducing more interesting characters to the cast. They've introduced, in the most recent chapter I've read, a new, antagonist type character for him to go against. So it is doing more to kind of lean away from the fan service stuff. And if it continues to do that, then I could imagine that this series goes into a positive direction. But if it goes back to leaning towards the fan service stuff, then I don't see myself wanting to pick this one up. That's really not my thing. I'm not really that into it. But it is weird that it's not in the Shonen Jump app. I don't know if there's a specific reason for that. I don't think it's because of the maturity level, because there are a lot of more mature titles that are on the Shonen Jump app. So if anyone has any idea why that would be, definitely sound off in the comments below. But because of that, I don't know if I should have less of an expectation that it would wind up getting published in English. I don't know. It's a big question mark for me. But as of now, if it did get published physically in English, I would not be buying this one. This brings me out to my number 9 title, and that is Maguchan God of Destruction. This is another comedy series. This one follows a God of Destruction, as the title suggests, named Maguchan, who has come down to Earth and has taken the form of this little, squid alien being, who is kind of being toted around by this young girl, almost like it's her pet. And Maguchan hates humans, he hates the Earth, he hates humanity. So a lot of the comedy of this series is derived from this evil god who has this really cute form, who hates humans but is dragged into all these very human and earthly situations. It is pretty funny. It has some good comedic aspects to it that make me chuckle, but the reason why this one ranks a little bit higher than something like High School Family is because it has started to introduce more characters and more aspects to the series that have made it a little bit more interesting. It seems like it might lean a little bit more into the shonen fighting stuff as we get introduced to other gods and other characters that relate to the gods, and see them have to fight against each other, or fight alongside each other and stuff like that. So I'm curious where the title is going to go in the future. I'm curious if it's going to lean further into the shonen fighting aspects, or if it's going to keep leaning further into the comedy aspect only. So we'll see what happens there. It's entertaining. It hasn't done anything to blow me away just yet, but it has a lot of potential, basically. This one I probably would not pick up if it did get released physically in English, but I think there are a lot of fans of the series out there who'd be really excited to see this one get released in English. I feel like this one could be one that doesn't last too long. Maybe it gets to about a year or so before it gets it ends. I don't want to say canceled, maybe it just ends. But there are a lot of titles that this kind of reminds me of that lasted about like 10 volumes worth of material, and then they ended. So maybe it'll get to that point. This brings me out to my next series on the list, and that is Phantom Seer. Now this is a more action-centric title, and the biggest draw to this title is the amazing artwork. The first time I saw the chapter title page on the Shonen Jump app, I was immediately drawn to it because I loved the artwork. And the story has been pretty decent, but it has only really started to entice me in the more recent chapters. Basically, it's a very simple setup. We have these shaman-type characters who use different abilities and different magic to fight against monsters. It's, you know, the type of thing that we've seen time and time again, the good guys fighting against the bad monsters. But the thing that really draws me here is the abilities that the shaman have are really interesting, and the artwork, especially when illustrating the monsters, is really, really well done. So that's something that makes this one a little bit higher on my list. I can see this title as being something that will grow on me quite a bit over time. And while now I'm kind of lukewarm about it, I think that this can, in the next few months, very well probably move up the ranks into my probably top 5 series as far as the newer 12 go. But right now it is a little bit lower. It's a good series. I know it has a lot of fans, and I think that it does, like I said, have a lot of potential. But right now it's still kind of finding itself, but it's doing a lot better job finding itself than some of the other titles that I've already mentioned. Right now I probably wouldn't buy the physical editions, but if it starts going in the direction that I think it will and starts becoming better in quality like I believe it will, then this could be a definite pickup eventually down the line. Following Phantom Seer is another comedy series, Me and Roboco. Now, a lot of people who have read this are probably going to be like, wow, you put that pretty high up on your list. I don't know why. I have this attachment to this title. I really enjoy the comedic aspects that this book has. Basically, this series follows a young boy who is in a world where most families have a robot maid. And he gets made fun of because his family does not have one. So he begs his mom, you know, can we please get one? Can we please get one? And she decides, okay, we'll go ahead and order one. So she orders this robot maid, and most of the maids have the very stereotypical appearance, you know, thin, slender bodies. Are supposed to be, you know, young and attractive looking. They help to take care of stuff around the house, take care of the kids and stuff like that. And when the main character's mom orders this maid, she comes in and she's like the polar opposite of what you see from every other robot maid. Roboco is, instead of being thin and slender, she is brawny and broad. She's muscular. She has more rounded features, a round bulbous nose, a round face and stuff like that. She's very strong, and she has a very different attitude, and it's like she doesn't understand the world like everyone else does. And this is kind of annoying to all the characters at first, but very soon as the series progresses, everyone becomes really attached to her, and it becomes this very nice, wholesome kind of attachment between the, you know, the kids and Roboco and all the different people in the village. Everyone comes to really appreciate her and her personality, and I really love that about this series. It's very wholesome, it's very fun, and it does a lot of good work in like making fun of manga in a very nice tongue-in-cheek way, which I really appreciate. This is a series that I hope does not get canceled. I hope that this one gets to run for a while. As of right now, I would probably buy this if it did come out physically. I think it depends on if it gets canceled or not. If it does end prematurely, that would impact me wanting to pick it up. But as of now, I really enjoy this title. I think it's a really nice comedy series, especially if you're familiar with manga, if you're familiar with a lot of different stuff, like especially Dr. Slump. If you've read and enjoyed Dr. Slump back in the day, this is probably going to appeal to you. And if you like the stuff that, like I said, is really tongue-in-cheek about the medium, then you'll really enjoy this one as well. Next up, another gag series, Mori King, and this one I really enjoy because, kind of like I was mentioning earlier with Magu-chan, this one leans really heavily into also being a shonen fighting series as well as being a comedy series. Now, Mori King follows, basically there's a young boy named Shota, and Shota has a bug as a pet. And he's raising this bug until it hatches. And so the day comes when it's about to hatch and become its fully grown rhinoceros beetle self, but instead of hatching into a normal rhinoceros beetle, it hatches into a full-grown human male named Mori King. And Shota's excited. He's like, okay, cool, you hatched, you're my pet, you're Mori King, awesome. But his sister Shoko is really shaken because all of a sudden there's this random naked dude in their house and she doesn't know what to do about it. So at the beginning of the series, it leans more into the comedy aspect of having this big insectoid, humanoid, bug dude walking around, and it's a lot of that kind of fish out of water comedy where he acts like a bug, but he's a bug that looks like a human and can interact with humans. So it makes a lot of comedic situations. But we find out that the reason that he's humanoid is because there's basically this, I don't want to say contest, but basically that's what it is, to find out who is going to be the new king of the forest. And Mori King is one of the 5 competitors to find out who's going to be the king. And on top of him, there's 4 other humanoid bugs out there that wind up, fighting against each other and stuff like that. So pretty quickly the manga starts going into the point where you're like, okay, people are going to start fighting in this series. And it does kind of lean in that direction. And that's one of the reasons that I really like this, is because I enjoy comedy series that also utilize action to make things a little bit more exciting. And this one does it in a really fun way. And one of the reasons why it does it in such a fun way is because it utilizes a lot about what we know about the nature of insects and the actual concept of how they act in the world and how they act in nature, and uses that kind of at the forefront of its comedy and in that kind of fish out of water type stuff that I was talking about. I did think that this title was going to be ending really soon because the first major arc was wrapping up, but then it turned out that that was just what it was. It was just the first major arc. So I'm excited to say that this is not done just yet. I hope that this one does get released in English, and now that I know that it's not wrapping up anytime soon, well, I say anytime soon, but now that I know it's going into another major story arc, I feel like this is a very strong, probably pick this one up if it came out in English. Moving forward from here is A Gravity Boys. A Gravity Boys is the second longest of the titles that I'm talking about right now. It's been around for about 40 chapters, so closing in on its first year. A Gravity Boys follows a group of boys who trained to go out into space back when they were on Earth. And then the Earth kind of comes to its end, and there are a bunch of different groups of guys like this who have been trained as astronauts to find new inhabitable lands and stuff like that. The A Gravity Boys wind up going through a black hole, and at the other side of the black hole they find themselves on a planet called Alpha Jumbro. When they land on Alpha Jumbro, basically it results in them having to figure out how to survive on this planet and kind of interacting with all the different flora and the different fauna on this planet, as well as some other interesting things that they come to meet in the early chapters of the series. It reminds me a lot of the series Grand Blue Dreaming. It has that same kind of flavor of comedy, I'd say like bro comedy, where it deals a lot with the personalities of these guys unfettered by the presence of adults or, women for the most part, which is kind of the way that Grand Blue Dreaming is, and a lot of why that series is so funny. And it's also fun because for the most part it's pretty wholesome. The comedy is pretty wholesome aside from a couple of jokes here and there, which makes it really cool to me because I don't feel like there's any guilty laughs in the middle of that. There's nothing that kind of leans heavily into usually what I'm talking about is it doesn't lean heavily into fan service, which is something that I really enjoy. It's a fun series, and I think that the best thing about this title is, while it started off a little slow, it does a great job of making sure that you know these characters, that you're familiar with these characters, who they are, and what they do. And that's what I was talking about earlier when talking about other comedy series. It's important to make sure that you familiarize your audience with who these characters are. And this series has done such a great job at it, and it makes the comedy work that much more perfectly in that you understand their motivations, and it makes their reactions to different situations that much more comedic. So I really enjoy this one. This is another strong maybe if this one does get published in English. I'm actually surprised that this one hasn't gotten announced yet, given that the 2 that have been announced are younger than this one, but I think it's because this one is more a comedy series, and maybe they want to let comedy titles last a little bit longer, or maybe they just are not as confident in a comedy title to do well if published physically in English than they are about like action titles. So whatever the case is, I do hope this one finds that it does get released physically in English, and I very likely would buy this one. Following up on this one is number 4, Mission Yosakura Family. This is the longest of the titles that I'm talking about today. This one's been around for over a year at this point. It started up sometime towards the middle of 2019. It follows a young guy who is friends with this girl, and he finds out that she's part of a family of spies, and her siblings are all different spies with different powers and stuff. And he also finds out that she wants for him to be her husband, essentially. She has to find a husband who will work with her family and work to protect her, as she's going to be the kind of matriarch of the family going forward. So he's really hesitant about it at first, but as the first chapter goes on, eventually he decides, okay, I'll do it, because he cares about her, and even though he doesn't have much of a romantic inclination towards her, he wants to make sure that she is indeed safe. So the series progresses from there and watches this main character as he develops his own skills as a spy, develops his own skills as far as fighting other people go. A lot of the early stuff is him learning different techniques from the different members of the family, learning more about the family, and then learning about some connections that his family actually has with her family. One of my favorite aspects about this series is that even though they are married, like I mentioned, they don't really have a romantic inclination towards each other, but as the title moves forward, that kind of develops, and they do wind up showing hints of feeling toward each other, which winds up being handled in a very wholesome and cute way that I really appreciate. I like that it's not really a will they, won't they, because they already have gotten married, they're already connected to each other, but it's kind of them becoming aware of and okay with the feelings that they may or may not have for one another. And it's done in a really nice way. This one also has developed really well as far as action goes and as far as developing the plot goes, because there is an ongoing plot that winds up becoming more and more apparent as the series goes on. It reminds me in a way of the structure of the story in Assassination Classroom, where the earlier parts of the story were very much just one and done chapters where they'll introduce a new character or they'll introduce a new obstacle, and the students wind up dealing with that, or the teacher winds up dealing with that. But then eventually you start getting hints of a larger story that's taking place in the background. And that's kind of what we get here. And at this point, a little bit over a year into the title, we have started to get more hints, bigger hints as to what the actual story is and how a lot of different characters are involved with what's going on in this world. So I'm really enjoying this one. This is another very likely pickup if it does come out in English. Physically, I would very likely buy that one. I recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's funny. It has a lot of good comedy in it, and it has a lot of cool action as well. The artwork is good. I really like the characters, and I like the inventiveness of all of the different characters' abilities that they use as spies. Now we're getting into the top 3, and all 3 of these are absolute buys for me, so I'm just going to put that out there right now. I highly recommend them, and my number 3 is Hardboiled Cop and Dolphin. This is the other title that has an existing pedigree with its creator, in that the creator of this series previously did the series Beelzebub for Weekly Shonen Jump. That series has never been brought over to the US, but I know that it is popular and it does have a lot of fans, and I'm hoping that if this one does well and if this one gets brought over to the US physically, then maybe they'll consider also doing Beelzebub down the line. This one does have a lot of comedic aspect to it, but it has brilliant fight scenes as it does develop into having more of that shonen fight aspect to it. And that's kind of what has pushed this one from being a middle tier to being a higher tier book for me right now. The series follows a hard-boiled cop who gets moved to a new area, pretty much. He has to go to this island where he's partnered with a dolphin named Orpheus. And Orpheus he's a humanoid dolphin. He's got a big muscular body, but he has the head of a dolphin. And he has a daughter with him who has some weird abilities. And we find out pretty soon in the series, so slight spoilers for early chapters of the title, that her abilities, which seem to be precognitive at first, are actually that anything she thinks up, anything she imagines, she can make reality. So, it could be something as small as we're going to go out and get some ice cream, and then that happens. Or it can be something like this man turns into a squid, and then that happens. So there are people in the world who want to basically kidnap her so that they can utilize her abilities for their own gains. And a lot of the villains in this series, the criminals and stuff that the cop partners have to take on, are fishmen, kind of the same as you would see from the Fishman Island stories in One Piece. They resemble that kind of fishman, if you know what I'm talking about there. So far we've had a couple of fight scenes, and one of them was really, really impressively drawn. It was very good, and it is basically the singular reason why this title is so far up on my rankings right now, and I cannot wait to see more of that fight choreography that we saw in that fight. It was just very impressive. It has a very fun story, very fun characters as well. I'm really enjoying Hardboiled Cop and Dolphin. If this does not get a physical release in English, I swear I'm going to riot. Now my number 2, these top 2 are both the titles that have been announced to get a physical release in English, so I will say I am definitely going to buy the physical releases of both of these titles when they do come out, and I highly recommend them. Number 2 is Undead Unluck. This one I had no expectations going into, and it started off a little bit slow. I'm going to admit the first chapter was a little slow, a little hard for me to get into, but it picked up almost immediately, and I really fell for this title. Basically, at the beginning of the series, we have this young girl who's kind of done with life and ready to give up because she has this unluck ability, as the title suggests, which means that anyone that gets close to her is going to be harmed due to her unluckiness. Something will happen to them, and it's worse the more attached to that person that she becomes. Then it winds up being a worse unluck that happens to them. She winds up meeting up with this guy who coincidentally has the undead ability, where he cannot die no matter what happens to him, which is perfect for her because she can actually form some sort of bond with him, some sort of a relationship with him, without worrying about him getting hurt. So it turns out that there are a lot of other people who are called negators, I think is what it is, who have unabilities, the abilities to negate different things like luck, death, and other things like that. And there's a group called the Union who is made up of a bunch of negators who begin to chase after these two characters to try and track them down because of their abilities. Now, it starts out with a couple of really awesome choreographed fight scenes, really entertaining and creative abilities that all these characters have, and I don't want to spoil anything because there is a big twist that happens that pushes this into a completely different direction than what I was expecting it to go into. Somewhere around like chapter 10, I think it was chapter 7 or 8 was when it happens. So around the end of the first volume of the series. And I loved it. I loved this twist. It is so good, such great action, awesome concepts. I really love this series. I highly recommend it, and I honestly do think that this is going to be one of the next big shonen action titles. So do not miss out on it when it does come out physically. I highly recommend grabbing that first volume. And that brings us down to my number 1 choice, which if you had told me a year ago or half a year ago that I was going to say this, I would have laughed in your face, but that is Mashel. When this series first came out, I saw the first chapter, the picture came up on the app, the description, the title, and I thought, this looks stupid. I thought the title was dumb, the description was dumb, the art looked dumb, and so I just completely shrugged it off and didn't read it. Fast forward to a couple months ago, and I started reading it, and I fell in love with this title in the first freaking chapter. Basically, this takes place in a world where everyone uses magic, and the main character, Mash Van Dread, cannot use magic. We find out that it's not that he is in a world where everyone else can use magic, it's that if you can't use magic, then the government comes and basically disappears you. So his adopted father has been keeping him hidden from the government all these years, and has been having him train his body physically over time. And something happens and he winds up being found out that he actually can't use magic, so the government agents come to take him away, and he winds up showing that he has trained his body physically so well that he doesn't need magic to take out people who can use magic. So it kind of has that One Punch Man type of aspect to it, where you have the main character is so strong that no one kind of stands a chance against him, and he's also kind of oblivious and silly. and doesn't really realize his own strengths and stuff like that, which also is very reminiscent of Saitama in One Punch Man. So if you enjoy One Punch Man, you'll definitely enjoy this. But it's also kind of melded with a lot of ideas that come from like Black Clover, with the people using magic and the main character being the guy who can't use magic and stuff like that. So the government agents tell him that basically they're going to leave him alone, but he has to enroll in this wizard school, which is pretty much just a manga version of Hogwarts. It has the same classes, you know, there's different houses. Instead of points, they get coins throughout the year. It even has its own version of Quidditch. So he has to enroll, and he has to basically be the top student there. And he winds up continuing to use his abilities with his strength, with his muscles, to hide the fact that he can't use magic. And it winds up making for a lot of very fun comedic situations. But very soon, as the series moves on, we find that it becomes a really awesome action series with amazing scenes of action, great fight scenes, awesome techniques that each of these characters have. It becomes really intriguing to see the way that, you know, these characters use their magic and stuff like that. I really love this title. I am so happy that it's getting a physical release, and I highly recommend it for everyone. I do have a lot of confidence that this one, as well as Undead Unluck, can become the next big shonen titles. So definitely check these two out. I am without a doubt buying these volumes when they come out. Even though I've read it on the app, which I do recommend for everyone to do, it's so good, I have to have it in my collection. I have to have it on my shelves behind me here. So that's my ranking for the newest 12 Shonen Jump weekly titles. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope this was informative, because the main goal here was for me to kind of talk about these series. And even if I wasn't the biggest fan, if one of these sounded interesting to you, I want you to go try it out. All of these titles, except for Ayakashi Triangle, are available to read on the Shonen Jump app. So you can download the app, you can read the first 3 chapters of any of these titles absolutely free, and then if you want, you can pay the $2 a month to catch up and read the rest of it. But there's a lot of good stuff. A lot of these I really did enjoy. There's, like I said, only one that I really do not like, and that's Our Blood Oath. So I hope that I hope there's not a lot of Our Blood Oath fans out there who are going to get mad at me and kind of jump down my throat about that. Anyway, let me know what you think about these 12 titles. Which of these have you been reading? What would be your ranking? Which of these would you buy? Which of these you think will get canceled? Let me know in the comments down below all your thoughts about these new Weekly Shonen Jump titles. What's going to be the next big thing? What do you think about that? Thank you so much for watching the video. If this is your first time checking out my channel, I really appreciate you clicking through and spending the time with me. I know this is a little bit of a long video, but I hope it was fun, entertaining, and informative. If you've been here for a while, I appreciate you hanging out with me again. Thank you so much for watching the videos. But if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button down below so you're notified of all the awesome content I put out every single week. I do videos talking about manga and Western comics, so whether you're a fan of either side of the graphic literature world, definitely subscribe to my channel, because I love talking about both. Thank you again, everyone, for checking out this video. I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out. Stay safe.